Welcome everyone to the Laureate Luncheon. I encourage you to find your way to your seats. We are so extremely honored to have with us President Olusegun Obasanjo and President John Mahama. Presidents, thank you so much for being here with us. Please join me in welcoming them. And of course, our new laureate now installed, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina and Grace are here. Please stand up so we can recognize you. Now, I wanted to, the symposium is over. Morgan Day, who's done such a great job, can relax. I can't, however, and there's another event this afternoon, and I want to let you all know that you are welcome to it. It is the launch of the Agro Africa magazine. Richard Mbaram and the Agro Nigeria Publishing Company, there you can see on the screen. And oh gosh, the cover for the first edition, the Lion of African Agriculture. So, and yes, so here's the thing, at 2:30, across the street, just come out of the Marriott, turn to your right, walk across the street, look to your left, see if any cars are coming. No, it's where we almost lose, laureates and, people that are engaging in things, or, everybody's looking at their cell phones, and you'll get run over. And then you go into the Ruan building and go up to the 34th floor. And I tell you what, if you haven't been up there, the view is spectacular up there. So, and come up and join with for the launch of the magazine. It's a terrific event, and I mean, we're pumped, right? We're launching a African magazine in Des Moines, Iowa. I mean, how cool is that? And our hosts, John and Janice Ruan, are here. John and Janice, can you stand up so we can recognize you? So we have a wonderful gathering. We're going to enjoy lunch, and check out the the menu. It should be there under your plate, on there. So there may be some special preparation, some special meals there for. Yeah, we take hours and hours to research this. And we'll be back up after lunch for the introduction of the keynote speaker for the laureate lecture, and also the presentation of the laureate diploma, and most importantly, the check. So, anyway, enjoy your lunch. Everyone enjoyed their lunch at the Laureate Luncheon. And that special meal prepared with a Nigerian accent from Ibadan and Abuja, and I hope you had the dessert. But we have even more substantive and delicious dessert for you now, with the laureate address. So, but before we do that, can I ask you one more time to express your appreciation to all of the Marriott staff and for creating and serving this meal. want to ask you a special favor to join in thanking all of the World Food Prize staff. So where's our Vice President Mashal Hussein? Where the professional year-round staff stand up? Okay, so no. Where are the rest of them? They're supposed to. Yeah. There. No, Nicole. All right. So you see, it's not many people standing, and they're not out of the room. So this is only possible because we have wonderful interns, volunteers, and members of our reserve corps. That is someone who's been an intern before, and we send them a notice that you're being recalled to active duty for 1 week. And now I'm going to have all of them stand up, and you'll see how this multiplies. So staff, stay up, but everybody else, all the volunteers and here, all around. So it's, you take some World Food Prize and you pour in water, and it expands exponentially. And that, I want to especially call attention to Ed Redfern. Ed, stand up here. Ed's been doing this for 28 years. Oh, and yeah. And Nikki Schissel, where's Nikki? Who's there? Nikki, stand up here. And that. So Ed and Nikki and I work together in the office of Governor Ray, and so we have a friendship that goes back. Nikki was in grade school then, and like. Anyway, this is the moment of the end of the, well, it's not quite the end of the week. There's the Global Youth Institute. All the students who are here are going to be waiting to hear from you tomorrow, President Adesina. But here, the end of the symposium. We've made it through the Laureate ceremony. All of those, all of you who bet on me not making it through this year, that you've lost your money, and that. But I double down next year. And that, but I only make it through thanks to the wonderful staff and volunteers I have. But this is the moment. This is the Laureate Lecture. This is the culmination, the recognition, and now to have before us to share his views, his vision, his thoughts, the individual who our selection committee has chosen to be the World Food Prize laureate. And when I first came, there wasn't a laureate address, but I felt we needed to have a meaningful moment in which the laureate can share with all of us his thoughts and as I said, his vision. And I know in the case of Dr. Adesina, they will be indeed very profound. So please join me in welcoming the 2017 World Food Prize laureate, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Quinn. I can tell you that in a world that is very hard to find faithful men and women, to find somebody like Ambassador Quinn that's thrown his entire life into not only sowing, but also fertilizing and watering and just encouraging everybody on with the vision of Dr. Norman Borlaug. It's very rare to find this kind of a man. So I'd like you to stand and also be recognized for all your great work. Please, let's give him a rounding standing ovation. He's a good man. Thank you. Thank you. And of course, he couldn't do that without his wife, so I know that you say that. Thank you for this Laureate's Luncheon, and thank you for a luncheon in which I get in, and there is Ibadan salad. And yesterday at the dinner, there was even a special steak, which was called steak a la Adeshina. And so, welcome to my restaurant. President Olusegun Obasanjo, former president of Nigeria, President John Mahama, former president of Ghana, John and Janice Ruan, Jenny and Julie Borlaug, representing the Borlaug family, the World Food Prize Council of Advisors, the World Food Prize laureates and their spouses, and they're all over here. You know, I'm just a little kid on the block. So if you might all just stand up because you're the great guys in which you just admitted me to your club. So where are they? World Food Prize laureates in there. Thank you very much. And thank you for welcoming Grace and I to your family, which we can now call our family. Dear friends and family of the World Food Prize, special recognition in particular I want to give to the Dean of the Board of Directors of the African Development Bank. I saw him somewhere. Yeah. Mr. Sami Zaglul, the Executive Director for my country, Nigeria, Dr. Bright Okugu, and all of my staff and colleagues from the African Development Bank. You know, these are the guys that work just like yours, you know, all night and all day. Please, thank you very much for being here. And as I look around, I see the future, Borlaugs, and I see the young people. You are the hunger fighters of the future. And so thank you very much for coming, and welcome to this launch event. Let me say I'm thrilled to have been asked to give this laureate address. And of course, I know that a laureate address is always something you think is very, very serious business. But when you actually when I got the award yesterday, I was going to be a bit serious, really. But when you see President Obasanjo dancing, then you have to really shake it up a little bit. So today I'll be speaking to you about Africa's pathway out of poverty. For millions of rural poor, their aspiration is that they will make it out of poverty, especially through their kids, and thereby laying the foundations of a march out of poverty for generations to come. This is my story. My father and grandfather were farmers and became so terribly poor farming that they had to work as part-time laborers on other people's farms. My father told me that farming did not pay. It was only through a benefactor that he made it out of the village to get a benefit of education, as low as that education could be. But it was such a golden opportunity, the lot of sacrifices that gave me the benefit of an education. And today, by God's grace, being given an incredible opportunity to stand on global stage to receive the World Food Prize. You can just imagine how mind-boggling that is for me. We must invest, therefore, in education across Africa, especially across rural Africa, for this is the fastest way to end intergenerational transfer of poverty. As a Christian, the Bible always inspires me. The Bible tells of a story of Apostle Paul preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ, and in a vision, he had a voice, a cry from the people of Macedonia. The voice said, "Come to Macedonia and help us." Paul arose and in obedience to preach the gospel and save the people. I know you all must be wondering whether this is a pulpit and whether you're listening to a preacher today. Of course, I am a preacher. For like Paul, I also hear the voices rising out of rural Africa, saying, "Come here and help us to get out of poverty. This agricultural gospel, in quote, was first preached by Dr. Norman Borlaug, the Nobel Peace Prize winner who created the World Food Prize, for he had the voices of a billion people, mind-boggling billion people. And through his dedicated work, delivered a green revolution across Asia that fed a billion people. Dr. Borlaug was always such a huge inspiration for me. But a moment in particular stands out in our relationship. It was in 2006, as we both walked on the streets of New York on our way to the Rockefeller Foundation. We were going to do the Africa Fertilizer Summit, chaired at the time by President Obasanjo. As we were walking across the street, he gingerly put his hands around my shoulder, and he said, "Akin, do you play football?" Of course, scraggy-looking me, what do I do with football in America? I said, "Well, I play soccer." But I was wondering why, out of the blue, he would ask me such a question. And then he proceeded, now with greater deliberateness in his voice. He said, "You see, in soccer, you never can believe you can win unless you score the first goal." And he said, "Akin, I want you to go out there and score goals for agriculture in Africa. Then Africa can believe that it can win with agriculture." As I said in the video yesterday, for me, it was like a call. It was a wake-up moment for me that has defined me ever since. I'm therefore proud to be a disciple of Norman Borlaug, to preach this gospel, which I call the agricultural gospel, across Africa. The new agricultural gospel is simple: to lift millions out of poverty, or people out of poverty. Agriculture must be treated as a business. And I think it's important to recognize, for in agriculture as a business lies the hope of economic prosperity for Africa. Let me share with you my walk on this, if you may wish, some kind of a missionary journey to reach Africa's rural poor and unlock the potential of agriculture on our continent. Every time that I pass through rural parts of African countries where the agriculture engine is, or let me say, should be unlocked, I see nothing but wasting potential. They sit on 65% of the uncultivated arable land left to feed the world, but can barely feed themselves. They hear of rich farmers in Europe, in America, and wonder why they themselves are left to languish in poverty. Suddenly, life must be better than this. What? Why have we forgotten them? Conventional economic growth models look down on the agriculture sector as a low-value sector. So much so that for decades, leading economists saw getting out of agriculture as the way to national prosperity. The path to prosperity was industrial development. Rising wages in the industrial sector will pull labor out of agriculture. This led to underinvestment in agriculture, the so-called primary sector. In the race towards industrial manufacturing, countries underinvested in rural areas, embarking on urban-biased development. The duopoles were created: poor rural areas versus rich urban areas. Extreme poverty in rural areas has turned them into zones of economic misery, but also fertile recruitment grounds for militants and terrorists. The biggest challenge today in development is how to create and spread hope across these battered rural lands. If we don't, the grinding poverty in rural areas and the hopelessness will cause African economies to implode. We must create sustainable paths out of poverty in rural areas. The way to do that is to invert the economic development model, turn the rural areas from zones of economic misery to zones of economic prosperity. And that solution lies in making agriculture a source of wealth creation in rural economies. Now think about it for a moment. A great opportunity to invest and promote agriculture is offered by the projected rise of Africa's food and agriculture market, which will top $1 trillion by 2030. We must start tapping into this potential market to create wealth and strongly supporting farmers, especially millions of smallholder farmers. I have been in development for quite a long time now, but I'm yet to see any farmer who wants to be poor. And neither have I met a subsistence farmer. Everybody talks about subsistence farmer. I haven't found one yet. What I have seen are hardworking farmers who simply are poor because they lack access to technologies to boost their production. Without access to affordable finance, without access to secure property rights for their lands, unable to turn their land assets into wealth, abandoned by political leaders, and left to fend for themselves like a boat left to drift alone at sea. Yet, like every one of us, deep down in their hearts is an undying hope that they will leave behind a better future for their children, that their children will not have to suffer the indignities that comes with poverty. The hope of millions of marginalized Africans is that through a good education, their own children will escape the traps and the clutches of poverty. The main highway out of poverty for farmers lies in having the right political leadership, one that is able to take bold decisions to unshackle millions desperately looking for help and an opportunity to create wealth. It was this search for political leaders that will stand up and be counted that led me and my colleagues at the Rockefeller Foundation to initiate the Africa Fertilizer Summit, backed by eminent global leaders, including Dr. Borlaug, with the inspiration of President Olusegun Obasanjo of Nigeria at the time. It was the biggest and the largest effort in Africa's history to galvanize leaders for agriculture. At the age of 92 years, Dr. Borlaug showed up in Abuja, calling on leaders to rise up, and they did. The result was the adoption of the need for an African green revolution, backed by 40 heads of states and governments. We had succeeded in turning back 30 years of pushback on the use of high-yielding varieties and fertilizers in Africa. But I must tell you part of the story which I will never forget. Dr. Borlaug stood on the lectern and he was addressing the heads of state. And he got to a point, he said, I don't need 22 of you. I don't even need 10 of you. I don't even need 5 of you. I just need 2 of you to rise up and fix this. And he said, well, I'm 92 years old now, but I want to see a green revolution before I die. And all of a sudden, President Obasanjo, from where he was sitting, you know, he's always with this nice-looking, agbada of his, he ran out of his chair and he ran straight to the lectern. The president of Nigeria, the largest black country in the world, without shoes. And his security detail wondered what had gone wrong with the president. And so he ran after him with his pair of shoes. But President Obasanjo kept running faster than his chief of, his defense, his security detail. He got in front, he held Dr. Borlaug's hands, and he looked into the faces of all the heads of state. He said, Dr. Borlaug has been telling us for a long time that we must have a green revolution. And you are not listening to him. Now, Dr. Borlaug, he's here, and now he's threatening us with death. And he said, absolutely nobody here wants to be responsible for killing Dr. Borlaug. He says, so all of you in favor of an African Green Revolution, let me say your hands up. All the hands went up, and that was how we approved it. Thank you, Mr. President. I hope you're still wearing shoes. But we won't get anywhere unless farmers in rural areas are able to access farm inputs. I realized that millions of farmers were unable to access improved seeds and fertilizers because rural input markets were poorly developed or absent in most cases. It was easier, actually, to find pop soda in rural Africa than to find Gebissa's high-performing sorghum varieties in most parts of the country. This led me, with my colleagues at the Rockefeller Foundation, to develop and work with several partners to roll out a major program to develop what we call agro-dealer networks. These are your mom-and-pop shops that you find in rural areas, all across rural Africa. And we wanted to make sure that no farmer will travel more than 3-kilometer radius to be able to find seeds and fertilizers. We had to establish guarantee facilities with banks to improve access to finance to all these agro-dealers. And I must say, these are all part of what, when President Obasanjo was leading this effort with Dr. Borlaug, President Obasanjo and Dr. Borlaug asked me the question, give us the 5 things that you think we must do. I said, first, we have to make sure that we build an agro-dealer network. We have to make sure that we have financing to support these agro-dealer networks. We've got to make sure we have smart subsidies that support smallholder farmers in Africa to use good technologies. That we had to set up domestic manufacturing of fertilizer and regional procurement of fertilizers. And that we had to also have an Africa fertilizer financing facility that will support the procurement and industrial manufacturing of fertilizer on the continent. Mr. President, I see when you look at me now, I have a high-five strategy for the bank, but I think I got a 5 from there at that time. And I want to thank you. I want to say that for all the 5 areas that we agreed, they are working and working very well. This initiative of the agro-dealers triggered a revolution, unleashing a new wave of rural farm input shops run by the private sector and successfully getting farm inputs to the doorsteps of farmers. Bill and Melinda Gates, and Raj was here, and he's a great friend of mine. He gave a fabulous speech here. And we visited in 2006 some of these agro-dealers in rural Nigeria. Bill Gates became so convinced and passionate about this that he decided that same fall of that year to actually commit money to create the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, where I later became vice president. With over $150 million in funding to Agro, we began to roll out these farm input shops. Today, millions of farmers can now easily gain access to farm inputs, boosting farm production, triggering rapid growth of seed and fertilizer companies. As always, myself and my colleagues were inspired by Dr. Borlaug's words, take it to the farmers. But the fact is, we could even get even greater results if farmers received strong support from governments, just like they did when Norman Borlaug led the Asian Green Revolution in Asian Green Revolution. Of course, I am an advocate of subsidies for farmers in Africa. Many have written up subsidies in Africa as corruption-laden and inefficient. And they were right. But they missed the crucial point. The problem was not the subsidy, but the system that delivered them. Back in 2004, while at the Rockefeller Foundation, I worked with Pedro Sanchez, World Food Prize winner, Jeffrey Sachs, as we designed the subsidy program for Malawi, and with some of the colleagues in the foundation. At the time, Malawi was experiencing its worst drought in history. Despite massive doubts and The government bought into the plan, and the subsidy program was rolled out. Donors lined up after an initial hoopla. It was a huge success. Within 3 months, Malawi, that was a net food importing country desperately suffering out of hunger, produced a surplus of 400,000 metric tons of maize and exported that to Zimbabwe. A few years later, I faced a similar situation in Kenya in 2007. I was working then at Agra. I noticed that we had at the time 2.5 million poor farmers that were so food insecure, but had no access to farm inputs. And I walked into a meeting where all the donors were discussing this question. And I said, well, what we've got to do for me seems like a very simple thing. Support them and help them out of poverty. As soon as I said we were going to support smallholder farmers, the guy who was leading the meeting said, next agenda item. To which I said, I will not be back at this meeting. I wish that I had the power to actually confiscate all of your diplomatic number plates. I'll send you out of the country because I can't believe how you can be enjoying the beauty of Africa and the sunshine of Africa, and you can watch 2.5 million people that can actually get out of poverty, not get out of poverty, just because of an ideology that you have against it. What's wrong with it? So I walked up to the Minister of Agriculture, and I said, you've got to support your farmers to get these 2.5 million farmers out of poverty. Well, he said, well, at the time, the World Bank wouldn't let us do it. I said, the last time I checked, none of these farmers live on 1800 Pennsylvania Avenue. They live in Malawi, and so in Kenya. So that was how we got it done. It was called Kilimo Plus, and it reached 1 million farmers that year. Once again, we had demonstrated that when pragmatic farmer-centric policies meet with right political leadership and a dedicated administrator, things happen. If you just have to go back to Ghana and see what President Kufuor did and President John Mahama did, you can see that you need absolutely to have great political leadership. Technologies exist to feed Africa. The challenge is to get them into the hands of millions of farmers. That was the situation with tissue culture bananas. Florence Wambugu, I don't know, I saw Florence when I was, is Florence here? Oh yeah, please. You can look at Florence over there. Terrific scientist. We had tissue culture bananas that can give you 40 tons per hectare. Today we have orange flesh sweet potato. We have provitamin A cassava. We got water efficient maize for Africa. We got all these technologies that Gebisa Ejeta developed, all the sorghum hybrid varieties. We've got all this BT maize and BT cotton that's all over the place. But they are sitting on the shelf. They are not for sale on the shelf. They got to be on the field of farmers. And so what we decided then to do when I was in Rockefeller was, how are we going to get the farmers to get access to financing to be able to afford the tissue culture bananas that Florence Wambugu and others had developed? And I remember, I want to thank very much Gordon Conway, who was my president at the Rockefeller Foundation, for allowing me to have $500,000 as a grant. We used to call it program-related investment. And he said, here is $500,000. Go and try out how you think we can do it. So I went to a bank in Uganda. I said, this is $500,000. Lend it to farmers because the price of the tissue culture plantlets was $1.50 per plantlet. And that's a lot for poor farmers. I said, but if it works and they pay your money back, next year you have to put in $1 million of your own money. And that was how we did it. Fast track that 4 years. The Rockefeller Foundation lost $4,500 on that facility. The farmers paid everything back. And then we went on from there to see President Museveni. And Gordon Conway went with me at night. At 2 a.m., we saw President Museveni. And President Museveni said, now we have too much bananas. And he turned to Gordon Conway. He said, please help us to clean it up. Of course, the way to clean it up is to create markets. But I felt so excited that at least we had a good problem, which was we had a lot more bananas than we actually needed. But then I found out that the banks that we had lent to years after, when I was running to be President Rockefeller, of the African Development Bank, I was campaigning. And the Minister of Finance of Uganda was one of the people I walked to actually ask for a vote. He looked at me, he said, well, you don't have to campaign with me, because I was the manager of the bank that you put $500,000 into at the time. And we ended up lending $20 million of our own money. He said, you have my vote. We went to Kenya. We mobilized when I was in Agra, $100 million. We went to Nigeria when I was Minister of Agriculture. We set up a risk-sharing facility, $350 million, and we leveraged $3.5 billion. And so we've shown that the banks can make money in agriculture if they can see the money trail in agriculture. And that's what we have to constantly develop. But no matter how much we try to help smallholder farmers, we can't go far unless we tackle corruption. And policies will fail unless we tackle corruption. When I became Minister of Agriculture in Nigeria, I remember that I went, obviously, to get wisdom from my president, President Obasanjo, who had nominated me to be minister in Nigeria. And he's a general, a wartime general. And Baba looked at me and said, Akin, as you take up this job, there's just one thing that is so difficult: fertilizer sector. It's so damn corrupt. He said, and it's so damn risky. He said, so do anything, but whatever you do, don't go there because it's a very, very messy sector. I looked at him and I thanked him, but because I consider him a father, I thought I'd get his courage of a general, but I didn't tell him. I went home and I told my wife, I said, Grace, we will fail unless we can end corruption on fertilizer in Nigeria. And that was how we developed the electronic wallet system that you talked about. And then we used it to deliver seeds and fertilizers over the mobile phone via vouchers to over 15 million farmers. We ended a corruption of 40 years in 90 days. Nigeria saw tremendous Nigeria saw over 21 million metric tons of additional food. We impacted lives of over 75 million people. I went back to the general, and the general told me, you didn't listen to me, but I'm glad you didn't. And that is how generals always encourage those that are corporals in their regiments. But I want to say that I will not have succeeded with this if there wasn't big political support. And one of the things that really excited me was with mobile phones was women. We impacted 2.5 million women. And I went to northern Nigeria once, and I was in this irrigated perimeter. And there were all these women wearing black powder. I see one of the journalists. You can stand up, sir, because you can ask him about this story. He went with me. And they were running towards where I was. And because of the security problem in Nigeria in the north, everybody was scared. So my security guy said, get in the car. They pushed me to the car. I said, no, but wait a minute. I'm a minister of agriculture. I'm not scared of farmers. And so let me be there. And so when the women got close, they all reached into their pockets and they pulled out mobile phones. And they said, Minister, we all get seeds and fertilizer now in our villages with mobile phones, and men cannot cheat us anymore. Now, I want to thank in particular President Jonathan. He's not here. He was my president, because without his political support, because to do such a reform, you need to have a backing of your president. It's not just about stepping on people's toes. I told the president we are going to walk on people's heads. And so he had my back covered, and for that I will be forever grateful. Please give it up to the president for what he did. Today, that system has gone global. As you know, the World Bank is taking it to Afghanistan. They're going to reach over 1 million farmers this year. The African Development Bank is scaling it up to over 30 countries as we speak. Let me say that we were here at, I'm not going to repeat it, about the panel where Jennifer Blanke did on the technologies for African agricultural transformation. As you know, the African Development Bank, the World Bank, Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, and also AGRA and Rockefeller will put $1 billion to take technologies to the to the farmers. But let me say, as we do all this, we must tackle the problem of malnutrition. We got 54 million kids that are stunted in Africa today. It makes no sense. And so I'm committed that the African Development Bank, we will help to address this particular problem. Because it's not just about a social sector, it's about the economy. Because stunted children today will lead to stunted economies tomorrow. And so we've got to change the lenses when we look at it. It's not a social sector, it's an economic issue. And that's why we launched the alliance, the African Leaders for Nutrition with Kofi Annan, the Bill Gates, Aliko Dangote, the Big Win Philanthropy, and the Global Panel on Food Systems and Nutrition. But while we were sitting over here having lunch, and this is a great thing about this kind of event, I looked over my shoulder and John Lowe, World Food Prize winner, looked at me and said, Akin, at the breakfast this morning, that you saw something for breakfast that was called Indomil, right? Indomil. Indomil is a food that young people like. It's made out of wheat and stuff like that. And she said, but that's not nutritious. And my brain started working right away. I have with me President Obasanjo, who is leading a big effort on zero hunger. I have here President Mahama, and I thought, okay, good. We can solve this problem right here. So I reached straight out to President Obasanjo. I said, Mr. President, will you join me in making a convening of all the food industry so we can get all the orange-fledged sweet potato, the pro-vitamin A varieties that we have for cassava, for them to begin to process it into making those noodles. Because when kids have that, then they have better nutrition. And just like he did during the time of the Fertilizer Summit, the president got up from there, but this time he had shoes. He walked straight up there to where John was, and he said, the same way he talked to me, he said, now give me the solution. And I said, John, Mr. President needs an answer. And she said, I'll give you what the plan is. Mr. President, can you show that plan? That's it. And so we have decided to launch a major effort in Africa with immediate effect that the President and I and the other World Food Prize laureates will do to ensure that we take the orange-fledged sweet potato into the food industry at scale. And I want to thank President Obasanjo and also thank President Mahama for that. Let me say that as we look at agriculture, we have to make sure that we unlock the productivity of the savannas. I've talked about that. I'm not going to repeat myself. But that's very important that we make that initiative of unlocking the savanna very, very important for us to succeed. But infrastructure will be important, and we must look at infrastructure differently. Let me just say a word on infrastructure. If you look at countries today where they invest, the agribusinesses and the food processing industries are all in the urban centers. They're located always close to the port. They bring in the food, intermediate products, they process it, and they send it right into the hinterland of the country. But that doesn't create markets. It doesn't create jobs. It doesn't stimulate anything really in the rural economy. So at the African Development Bank, we've decided that we are going to support the creation of what we call staple food processing zones or agro-allied industrial zones that will be special economic zones where we will invest in power, in water, in roads. And the food businesses can be located there close to where the farmers are. And then they can buy the produce, they can process the produce, they can create the markets, they can create lots of jobs, and ship only out finished products. And I think this would transform the rural economies of Africa significantly and create massive amount of jobs like we've never seen. Let me say that I know the future belongs to the youth. And I know that agriculture is the coolest thing that you ever found. And for the young folks that are here, my son is not here, but I'll tell you the story. And those of you that are not here last year, I'll tell you again the story because I'm on a mission to convert you into agriculture. No, there's not going to be any tithes or anything like that. My father wanted me to be a doctor by all means. And so I was only 14. And so whenever I took the exams, he would fill the forms. Medicine, first choice. Second choice, veterinary medicine. Third choice, dentistry. So I had to be a doctor anyway. But every time that I would apply, they would say, sorry, your grades didn't make it to medical school, but we take you for agriculture. My father, who grew up as a poor farmer, said, no, go again. So I tried 3 times. And every time they took me for agriculture. Then my father said, God must desperately want you in agriculture. So when I finished my PhD degree in the United States at Purdue University, I was so happy to write my dad a letter. And I signed it, Doctor. So my dad called me doctor from that time on. But when our son wrote to me, graduated from medical school in the United States, my dad was 90 years old, so we brought him to the United States. And he was trying to ask a question. And he turned and he said, doctor. So I said, yes, Dad. He said, not you, I mean the real doctor. To which I told my father, even the real doctor would tell you, take your medication 3 times a day, but only after food, which means agriculture is still more important than medicine. And that's why I think agriculture is the coolest thing you can ever find. And we at the African Development Bank are putting a lot of money. Last year we spent $800 million in getting young people into agriculture. We will spend an average of $1.5 billion every year for the next 10 years. To be able to do that is the coolest thing you ever found. But as I said, women make all things happen. Who will be here without a woman? You won't be here. And we are working at the African Development Bank to empower women, and we've set up an initiative that's called Affirmative Finance Action for Women, to provide them access to $3 billion in Africa to support women businesses alone. I think the men can come after hours, we can talk about that. But it's just going to be about women because I've never found any bird that flies with only one wing. You only fly with 2 wings. And when you fly like that, you go faster with women. And I'm very confident about that. So, as I close, let me say that in this drive to feed Africa, we are not alone. Many of you here have gone before us. On your achievements, we are building new alliances and partnerships to do even more. So many people, of course, helped me to get here, and my lovely wife, Grace, my sons, Rotimi and Shegun, my parents, my wife's parents, my entire family. I had great teachers in high school, and some of the teachers that are here from high school, are you still here? High school teachers, they inspire you a lot. My professors when I was in the university, Gabisa Ejeta sat on my PhD thesis. He's a very short man, but he won't stand up. He sat on my PhD thesis committee. J.D. Axtell really fired me up a lot. Lowell Haddon, great man. These were the people. Wood Thomas, they made you have a passion for agriculture. And when I was at Purdue University, a time came, Mr. President, I have to say this publicly. because I have to give honor to whom honor is due. Because a time came, I came on a scholarship, but then my scholarship money wasn't paid from Nigeria. And so I ran out of money. And I remember Purdue was so cold. And I was going to the campus, and I had my last 25 cents on earth. And I stood on the bus line, and as I got into the bus, the guy said, "It will be 50 cents, please." And I put 25 cents, and he looked at me. And I said, "Well, that's all I have on earth." And he put his hand in his pocket, and he put another 25 cents in it for me. And I went to university, got to the campus, and I went to the office of John Connors, one of my professors. And John Connors thought I was a bright student. And I told John Connors, I said, "John, I haven't eaten for almost 3 days." And John Connors reached into his drawer, he picked out a checkbook, and he wrote me a check for $100. It was my first semester as a graduate student. He said, "When you get your PhD 5 years from now, you pay me back the $100. And then he said, "Go to room 575. I went downstairs. I saw a mathematician who wasn't friendly to people because he was all like about computers. I stood there, and his name was, Phil Abbott, world-class trade economist. And I said, "Excuse me, please. I was asked to come here." He said, "Are you the Nigerian student?" I said, "Yes, please." He said, "I hear you're smart." I said, "I don't know about that." He said, "But I hear you have no money." I said, "That I am very sure about." He said, "You have an assistantship." I said, "What does that mean?" He said, "That means that your scholarship gets paid. It means you get $575 a month." And I said, "Excuse me, sir, I'm just so sorry. Will I get paid at the end of this month?" And that was the first time Phil Abbott turned. He turned and he looked at me. And he said, "Young man, this is United States of America. When you work hard, you get paid." I said, "Don't get angry. I need this money." And that was how I actually went through school. And then Gabisha was on my committee in Sawmill, supported me. And of course, John Sanders, my professor for PhD, supported me. And it's because of these kind of people that I'm actually here today. And I remember when I finished my PhD, I walked back to John Connors' office. I handed him a check for $100. He shook my hands. He said, "Congratulations, doctor." This is what America does by opening up its doors to others. I don't know whether he's here or not, but Jay Ackridge, the dean of Purdue University, the provost, and also the president of Purdue University, they were all there yesterday. I wouldn't be here without them. Absolutely not. But let me also thank those that helped me. Gordon Conway hired me in the Rockefeller Foundation. Bob Hurt trained me a lot. Gary Tonenson, he really helped me to understand the importance of focus with little money. When I was in Rockefeller Foundation, my first job day at work, Gary Tonenson invited me to lunch. I felt good. My director was inviting me to lunch. We went downstairs, the cabs, where you get all those $1 hot dogs. He bought a $1 hot dog. He gave me one. He took one. And I thought we were just having an appetizer on the way to the restaurant. And then he said, "We're going right back into the building." And we sat down. He said, "Welcome to lunch." He said, "What would you like to drink?" I said, "I'd like Sprite, please." He said, "We don't have Sprite, but we have a Kelvinator there with water. You can get some water." And got the water. I sat down. And then he looked me straight in the face. He said, "Welcome to the job of managing a dead man's asset. Find the sharpest mind you can ever get in the world. Put them to task to get things done. And then get out of their way." That is what has shaped me to who I am today. Gary is not here, but I will forever be grateful to him. I want to thank Kofi Annan, who supported me big time. I want to thank all my staff in the Ministry of Agriculture in Nigeria, the advisors I had. If you're here, please, on the agricultural transformation agenda of Nigeria, please stand at this time. The stage is yours. I want to thank, once again, President Obasanjo, sir, for having the confidence in making me a minister, in nominating me. But also, I want to say something about President Obasanjo and my wife, which gets me into trouble. Because President Obasanjo calls me Akin 45. And he calls Grace, Grace 55. You may not understand what that means. But that means she says 55% of my success is due to Grace. The rest is mine. And when I won the World Food Prize yesterday, I walked up to him. I said, Mr. President, I've been at 45 for a long time. What do you think I am today? He said, 46. Let me thank Ambassador Quinn once again, a man of impeccable honor who has continued to inspire and encourage me. Professor M.S. Swaminathan, the World Food Prize Board, for awarding me this cherished award, and all the wonderful staff of the World Food Prize Foundation for doing an incredible job of organizing all these events. We are very grateful. Thank you very much. And last night, I had the privilege of donating my World Food Prize award of $250,000, and that's a lot of money. It's $250,000, to set up a fund fully dedicated to providing grants, fellowships, and financing for the youth of Africa in agriculture as a business. And we were having dinner. This man can make miracles happen, called Ambassador Quinn. He came to me, he said, Akin, you may want to come back for just a second. There's a man that wants to talk to you, but it's worth leaving your stake for a while. And I got up, and his name was John Harrington. And he said, I was so moved when you donated your $250,000 to support young people in agriculture. And therefore, I've decided to match it for you. And so anytime Ambassador Quinn asks me to get up from anywhere, I follow. So today I'm honored to announce that a portion of my World Food Prize and all other things that we will mobilize will be used to support the work of the World Food Prize Africa Youth Institute, which we will set up. The World Food Prize Africa Youth Institute will support young entrepreneurs and young scientists and scholars who will be named Borlaug Additional Fellows. This will allow us to strategically continue Dr. Borlaug's legacy of taking agricultural technologies to farmers, and my philosophy of promoting and engaging agriculture as a business. And as we see those fellows, one thing they are always going to get, they'll get a badge of Dr. Borlaug with an arm of Dr. Borlaug on their shoulders saying, "Go score more goals." The youth of Africa are the future of the continent, and I pledge my full support. So as I close, just like Elijah in the Bible, thought he was alone, until God spoke to him that there was an army of others who feel exactly the same way he felt. That's how I feel right now. As I look around this hall, I feel the same passion. I sense the same determination. I see an army of partners willing and able to help score more goals for African agriculture. Together, we will. And certainly, Dr. Borlaug will be delighted that the gospel of agriculture as a business finally helped to end poverty in Africa. In this journey and endeavor, so help us God. Look at the person next to you and give them a high five. Say, high five for Africa. Thank you. Thank you very much.
"2017 World Food Prize Laureate." Let's hear it again for Dr. Sheena. Have that. So while John Ruan is making his way up here for the diploma presentation, I want to just add on just a second about last night when I came to the table. There were a lot of people there trying to get Dr. Adeshina's attention and take pictures with him. And he finally got to sit down. And a couple of people in front of me and just said, come back later. And so it was with some trepidation that I went up. And, you could see he wanted to eat. He was hungry, finally able to sit down after that long day. And so I said, Joaquin, I think it'd be worth it to stand up and come over here for a second. So what an incredible moment that was. And I'm so thrilled for that. And God bless you for your announcement about the World Food Prize, Africa Youth Institute. It is going to be spectacular, and we are going to be a full partner with you in this regard. So, John, why don't you come over here? And I'll give you this. And why don't we present this first? Yes, I think so. Yeah, well, we'll present the diploma first. Yeah. All right, so why don't you go on? You want to go on the other side? And that? So Jim Heemster will tell us where to go. All right. Okay, are we all right?
Let's take a picture with Grace.
Grace is coming up.
Grace 55.
Normally I would say, may I have the check, please? But I already have it. But I'm going to give it to you. Oh, and then you're going to give it to somebody else. But
Oh, right now.
55. No, I actually have one little add-on announcement here. I'm as maybe not as much as the fellow you talked about last night, but I'm equally impressed with the fact that he's donating his prize money to help the youth of Africa. And his recent announcement that he's going to start an effort to create an African Youth Institute, World Food Prize African Institute. So, Dr. Adeshina, I would like to announce that the Ruan Foundation will donate $100,000 to start seed money for that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, John, I've known the Ruans for 20 years, and always at the right moment, at the right time, and the right need is there. The personal generosity of the Ruan family. It is in medical, in fighting hunger, in so many ways. They are the example of philanthropy, doing good, and long term. John, Janice, Ruan family, thank you so much for all that you've done. That's it. So now I have to ask your indulgence for the youth. And I'd like to ask everybody to just stay in place for about 5 or 6 minutes while I let all the Youth Institute members go out and get on their buses and off to their afternoon events. So, and this is like a systematic approach, but just indulge us for a couple of minutes, get the youth, get them going to be inspired, and then we'll move on. And then you will move over to the Agro Africa across the street, 34th floor in the Ruan building.
So one moment, students. So I'm just going to make a couple of announcements. If you'll listen, we want to make sure you get to the right spot. Students, make sure you look at the sticker that's on your name badge. If you don't have a sticker, you'll see Kelsey at the buses downstairs. Students who are going to the early morning harvest immersion have a blue sticker, so please exit the hall if you have a blue sticker. Look over here to the right of the stage. You'll see my colleagues raising their hands. Please head that way. Yep, they're coming up. Yeah, I know. We got to make it move. Okay.
Move fast.
Okay, we got to go a little bit faster. Students who are going to Hawkeye Breeders, if you have a